These human being insights, as well as these bodies or temples, were studied for their beauty with love and respect and admiration. This is about the grandmothers. This is a translation of the painting Ode to the Grandmothers. Why it is important to me, as well as my discoveries and explorations of the past 25 years and counting. This is an ode to those who are often forgotten, and without them, we wouldn't be here. About 25 years ago, the painting idea came to me as a vision. I didn't quite understand the significance of the image, but I was extremely fortunate to come across this amazing woman who allowed me to photograph her. She was a widow who had developed mouth cancer after the death of her beloved husband. She was a very open-minded soul, and her life experience was an incredible resource that was forgotten and wasted. Definitely wasted. Tucked away on the bottom floor of a high-rise building, who would listen to the children when they came home, alone, talking to each other. The latchkey children, who were doing things and watching things in the absence of their parents and grandparents that would not lead them to a happier future or a respect for themselves or their bodies or their minds. Such was the wisdom of this beautiful, wise woman. She was so sad that there wasn't a mother or a grandmother there to meet the latchkey children, to embrace them, to cook for or with them, to share and guide with them, to listen to them, to hear and understand them. Instead, they were left to struggle on their own. I had to paint her naked, or most people would just have walked past. Had she been clothed, you wouldn't have even given her a second glance. It's just as important as me making this translation and recording other people's perspectives, which doesn't make me look subjective. I had my Eureka moment, understanding what this vision meant that was given to me, when I came across a fascinating article on the social sustainable behavior benefiting the survival of orca family pods. The most successful orca families are those where the young bulls are cultured enough or intelligent enough to listen to their grandmothers. You see, the grandmothers remembered the sacred principle of rhythm. The grandmothers remembered Mother Nature's rhythms and cycles. Where to find food in times of scarcity. And so the rich vastness of experience was exactly that which saved the orca's family and gave it a longer, more sustainable life. This has led me to a conscious question. What makes those grandmothers unique? The answer came rather playfully from a unique source, manifesting itself inside me. At that exact point in time, my doctors had discovered an influential bacteria inside me, which had been influencing my life in a rather negative way, then discovering the scientific fact that the gut influences the brain. When my friend Supriya synchronistically spoke of good families and their influential culture, it became clear to me how to formulate this translation. This is a collection of remarkable family cultures, as well as the influence of cultural education and its effects on social sustainability. I have gathered culture, or a new perspective on culture, and I have gathered a few amazingly beautiful souls who are descendants of amazing human beings, because this is an ode to life. Introducing heroines of culture, the grandmothers.
Born in 1900, which means she was born into a period where education was not important for women. She never learned to read or write, but believe me, she could count every penny that she had, and she knew exactly when she was being cheated. Where do I start about telling you about this fascinating woman? She was a very important part of our life. We grew up, even though we did not live on the same island, but we grew up spending many summer vacations with her. We were taught to rise early, to work hard, to be honest, respectful towards others, no matter who they were or what they were. One of her philosophies was that in growing, you will meet certain people on your road, you will meet certain people on your trips going up the ladder. To be respectful to each and every one of them, because it doesn't matter how high you go, if somewhere along the line you stumbled, it was those that you passed on the way up would be there to help you and break your fall should you not make it all the way up. And yeah, you were going to climb a lot of ladders and you were going to have a lot of falls before you get to where you actually want to be. Because she was not able to enjoy education herself, it was very important to her that her children be educated. I think my grandmother was a feminist and a fighter for women's freedom long before it ever became an issue or an organization. That's what you were supposed to do. You were supposed to work hard to achieve whatever you wanted to in life. It was not, you're not, one of her things was, you're not Jewish, so there's no manna going to be falling in your hands from heaven. You want something, you work for it. She was never married. I think it was because she was just too stubborn to have any man ruling her life. But she did have 10 children, which were all taught the value of hard work. She made sure that regardless to what it was, they all studied, they all became something in life. Farming and taking care of animals and planting and gardening and harvesting, that was part of our life, but it was not the life that she wanted for us. She wanted us to be bigger. She wanted us to be better. She wanted us to move on and actually become something no matter what that something was. And everyone, most of her siblings, or my mother's siblings, I should say, the elder ones, the elder sisters, they did not have the possibility of moving on or moving away to study. Studying in those days cost an enormous amount of money, which my grandmother did not have. But the unity of the family was that her elder sisters, when they moved away and they got married, it allowed the younger siblings to have that possibility of studying. My mother left St. Martin when she was 10 years old, and she went to Curacao to further her studies. Was in the middle, 1943 was in the middle of the war, and my grandfather really felt that she would have better opportunities growing up on a bigger island, let's say, with more possibilities. That they did. Because of this family unity, my mom's elder sisters, what they learned from their mother was family comes first no matter what. You reach out to each other and you cling to each other, because the most important thing that you will have in life is your family. And each one of these siblings look after each other. My mother stayed with one of her older sisters. She came in September 1943. She came to Curacao. Her older sister, she got married in June 1943. Family unity again. Can you imagine nowadays a recently young bride is gonna take in not one but two of her younger siblings? Can you imagine in this day of age, 2019, a young groom is gonna tell his wife, yeah, sure, I'll take in your sisters and I'll raise them as my own, no problem. And my aunt became my second grandma. She worked at home. She learned to be a seamstress. Her husband, my Uncle John, he worked with the electric company and he worked in shifts. He practically raised my mom, and they worked very, very hard, again with the influence of my grandmother, because even though she couldn't read and write, the younger siblings had to send home a report card, and she would find somebody to read that report card for her and keep her updated as to the progress of her children. We, as her second generation, it was expected to send your report cards to Gran, that she can keep ahead of your progress and how good that you were doing. It was essential to our upbringing. Education was the most important. Good manners will open the doors that the education will give you. And you can have the best education in the world, but if you don't have good manners, the chances are very, very big that you wouldn't get in that door. Norms and values were part of our upbringing. You respected your elders. If your elder said jump, you jumped, and that was the end of the story. There was no questions asked, or why, or how long, or how high. You just started jumping. It was part of your upbringing. You listened to your elders. You respected your elders, which is a great contrast to the kids that we have nowadays, who have the right to freedom and the right to express themselves, even if that means being rude and disrespectful towards others. My kids were brought up a little different. They still have norms. They still have values that were instilled with them. But the difference is, if they are told to jump, they respectfully ask, why should I jump? What is the purpose of jumping? They want an explanation. They want to know the why behind everything. We were told, no, if you ask why not, your answer was, because I said so. our kids, again, because of the freedom that we got from my grandparents or my grandmother, is they want to know why no. And no, you can't do that because it's not age appropriate. No, you can't do that because you may harm yourself or you can harm yourself. And they understand that. In a lot of things I don't agree, but I can understand why our grandparents, why my grandmother did it. It was just a simple form of respect. You did what you were told, and in doing what you were told, you learned the reason why you were told to do that. Don't ask why you have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. You get up at 4 o'clock in the morning because that is when you milk the cows. And you milk the cows at that time because it has to be sold before 6 o'clock in the morning. You have to be out there on the road by mule, walking, horse, whatever. It has to be sold. And that is why you get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And you learned it eventually. My grandmother passed away when she was 85 years old. She did go to doctors because it was enforced in her that she had to go to a doctor. But she was a specialist in herbs. She knew exactly which plant, which herb, even which weed could be used for every ailment. And a lot of us clear weeds today because it's a weed. But every plant, everything that is grown, it has a purpose. It has a use. And that is what you do. You make use of everything that is around you without being abusive of the things around you. We were taught to be respectful towards others. We were brought up because just because you have the right to do something does not make your doing it right. You respect others. Your boundaries end where someone else's begins. 4 things that she said that it was necessary, was essential for every young girl to know. How to act like a lady, how to work like a horse, what it is to be a mother. Why? Yeah, act like a lady. Ladies open doors everywhere. It might most probably get you a good husband also, but that was not necessary as far as my grandmother was concerned. It was nice to have someone with you, a partner to help you. But if you can stand on your own 2 feet, if you can take care of yourself, then you didn't necessarily need anybody. It's nice that you have that person with you, but you're not dependent on them. Make sure you have your education. Having an education means having a job that you like, and that was also very important. You didn't do something because it was fun, because it made a lot of money. You did it because you actually enjoyed it. And she knew we didn't enjoy getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to milk cows, so that was not our job. You had to find something that you actually enjoyed. And if you can find something that you enjoyed doing, then you would have a very profitable life because you're doing what you really, really like. And I think that's why one of my aunts became a school teacher. My other aunt, she became a seamstress because she just loved the idea of designing and clothing others. And we were probably the best dressed kids anywhere around because whatever strip or garment was left over from her clients, they always let her keep it. And no matter how big that strip was or that piece of cloth, Auntie was always able to make a skirt, a blouse, a scarf, or you got something out of it. It was leftovers, but you never looked at it as a leftover. You looked at it as an amazing gift. Like, wow, look at me. The fact that I was an extremely skinny kid also helped, so any piece of cloth would make me something beautiful. But that was her. It was the lesson learned here is nothing goes to waste. You don't waste anything. It's one of the rules also that we were brought up with was waste not and want not. If you don't waste it today, you'll have it tomorrow. And it was always better to have and not want or not need than to need and not have it, which was also a structure to save. We were taught to save. We were taught to look forward to a rainy day. Again, my grandmother's farming lessons. You may have a great harvest this year, but there is no guarantee that the next harvest will be just as good. Anything could happen. You provide and you take measures and you make sure that you have something for when it's not as good as it is today. As I said, a very, very strong woman who instilled in us the importance of having an education. And for her, an education wasn't only what you learned in school, it was also having morals, it was also having standards and values, norms to live by, which were all given to us, gifted to us from small, and which we still live with to this day. Proof of that is how of what she felt and what was instilled in us as education. My mother and her siblings, most of them finished what you would call a secondary school. Most of them did not have an opportunity to continue studying, so they went straight out of secondary school, they went to work. My mom, because of this, how would you say, instilled in her the importance of an education, she started to work in a bank as soon as she finished school when she was 17 years old. And she built and worked herself up to the highest position in a bank that was given to any woman in the 70s. She had that, she showed and she proved her worth and got that position. My aunt, one of them was a school teacher, one was a seamstress, one started working in a hospital as a nurse. So they tried to improve themselves. On the other hand, my grandmother's second generation, which would be myself and my cousins, we all have at least a bachelor's degree or the equivalent thereof. Some of us made it and have a master's degree. Oh, we even have a few doctors and engineers in between. This instilling of the importance of an education goes on to my grandmother's fourth generation, which would be my children, my cousins' children. They are not striving for a bachelor's degree. They are competing amongst them as to who will get their masters first and how many masters we can achieve, we can acquire. I'm not saying that my family is the smartest among anybody else, but it just goes to show that you can achieve, you can do whatever you want to if you so want to. Coming from a grandmother who had absolutely nothing except her fields and her animals, to having her third generation, her great-grandchildren who are all, or most of us, they are all doctors, they are teachers, they are engineers, they are bank managers. It's amazing, it's amazing. And this from a woman who had 10 children, who was unmarried, and who had to work the land to take care of her children. So without any help whatsoever from any government, there was no welfare in the beginning of the 1900s, in the 1920s and 30s, when most of the siblings were born. There was no such thing as a welfare. You took care of your children and you did the best of your ability, to your ability, and that is exactly what she did. And all of us now can look back with pride what this amazing woman did. I can't remember my grandmother ever being sick. Of course, in her late 80s, she developed what doctors considered high blood pressure or heart problems. This woman was 85 years old, and she was into fitness before fitness was even a word. I know her as walking for miles, something like 5 kilometers going and 5 kilometers back to collect hay and grass for her animals, for her cows and her sheep and her goat. And she would walk around with like these huge 20-kilo bales of hay and grass on her head. I still don't know how she did it. Never faltered, never missed a step, and she did it. And we're into Pilates now. Believe me, running around animals and harvesting and planting, that was all the Pilates and exercise and fitness that she needed. To this day, I still believe that the only thing that killed my grandmother, and I'll probably go to my grave believing that, is when doctors decided that at 85 she was too old to work her fields. Mind you, this is the only thing that my grandmother knew her whole life. And I think more than old age or anything else, it was simply grief and the lack of being able to work that killed her. From a woman who her whole life got up at 4 o'clock in the morning to teach us what was hard work, and not being able to do anything else. I'm not blaming my aunts or uncles or anybody for this. They were just following doctor's orders. But I still to this day believe that that is what killed her. Not being able to take care of her animals, not being able to work, not being able to do what she wanted to and what she loved so much. I really think that is what killed her. She was not ready to retire yet. But we still live on with her memories. We still have those, and that is something that we all pass on to our kids, and hopefully one of these days our grandchildren will know also what an amazing, hardworking woman they had as an example. I mean, ask me who was my idol? My grandmother. Ask me if there's anybody who I would love to bring back from heaven and just have half an hour conversation with them. It would be my grandmother. I don't think half an hour would be enough time to ask her all the questions that I would still want to ask her, or for her to give me the rest of her wisdom, which she probably already did, but I forgot. I would just need a refreshment, but that would be it. That would be the half an hour that I would want from someone in heaven for all of her great-grandchildren that she never met, or that never met her, because I'm pretty sure she's looking down on them from wherever she is. But that they would meet her, that they would hear from her that there is no problem in life. Life does not have any problems. Life gives us challenges. It gives us ups and downs. It gives us obstacles. Life does not consist of problems. We just have to learn how to get over these obstacles or get around them, whichever. And that is what life is, to not have things falling down trees in our path that we just sit there and look at them and wonder why this tree has fallen, but instead she taught us to find a way to get around that tree. Okay, so there's a fallen tree, chop it up and make a cabin, or use it for burned wood, or grill on it. That is what you do. You find solutions. You don't look at it. You find a solution. And I think that that is one of the things that has brought all of us a long, long way. If she can do it, why can't we? And she was able to do it with much, much less than we have now. So yeah, there are no obstacles, there are no problems in life. They're just obstacles to overcome. That's what we've learned to do, overcome obstacles. You don't sit and cry over spilled milk. You clean it up and you go out there and you milk the cow again. And if there's no milk in the cow, well then you find a goat or you find a sheep. But you find a solution. And that's what we did. We find solutions. That's what we learn. And I think, yeah, I'm very, very blessed that I got this wisdom from her, and I got these philosophies from her to take me through day-to-day life. And every time you think there's an obstacle, or you think you're facing a problem, or you want to figure, how am I going to overcome this? I think back that she was able to put 10 kids through school without having any education herself. Yeah, there ain't nothing that we can't do. We can do anything that we want. You just have to want it bad enough, and you'll get it. You'll get there. My mom is one of those. Again, a good example of a terrific grandmother. She's a cancer survivor, twice. The first time she went in, the doctor told her that they would probably have to amputate her breast because the size of the tumor was a golf ball. My mom, a strong believer, one who never gives up. Her faith in God, her trust in herself, mind over matter. When she actually went in for the operation, it was not, they could not find a golf ball. It was a tumor the size of, a pit. Very, very small. It could hardly be seen. No amputation. She went in, she had her operation, she recovered, and usually in cancer patients they say, well, if it does not come back in 5 years, you can consider yourself as being cancer-free. 6 years later, another tumor presented itself. Now, most people would sit and cry and like, why is this happening to me, and why again? And my mom's reaction was, oh heck, here we go again. And she did it, and she survived it twice. She never lost faith in her religion, her God. She never lost confidence in herself. She never had any doubts that this too will pass, that she would overcome this also. Example of my grandmother's strength. We have lived through hurricanes, volcanoes, not earthquakes, but tremors. We've had a couple of pretty strong hurricanes that we survived, that we lived through when most of the island was completely destroyed. And it never occurred to me to sit and wonder, how are we going to do this? You got up, you cleaned up, and you removed the obstacles, and you went on. And that's what you do. You remove obstacles and you grow. Generosity and charity was also part of the upbringing. I remember once my grandmother, there was this lady who would come every day. My grandmother made her own yogurt. She made her own cheese also at home. And I remember there was this one lady who would, almost every day she would come and she would go with milk. And she would always tell my grandmother, I'll pay you tomorrow or I'll pay you next week. Now, just so that we're clear, my grandmother was not a rich person. She never went hungry, so which means she was not poor. She had her own home. But there was always place in her heart for another one. And one of the things also that she told us was to be generous and to be charitable. That part of being a decent person was to be able to share and give to those who are less fortunate. And my question was, how do you mean she's less fortunate? You know, she was less fortunate in the sense that as little as my grandmother had, she considered that this woman had less. Her teachings was, if you are good, do good unto others and good will come back to you. My grandmother never became rich in the financial sense, but the good came back that we've never been short on anything, neither her children or her grandchildren. Regardless to whatever, we've always had a roof over our heads. The generosity that no matter how unfortunate or how bad you think that you had it, there was always someone who was worse off than you. Lesson that we've learned after natural disasters and hurricanes. My mom, bless her heart, it is so big. The same thing, Mom, you know he's borrowing money, but he's never going to pay it back. That's okay, sweetheart. I'll get it back in another way. And we keep doing this, generation after generation after generation. We keep doing it. But then when you look on the other side, you know you're giving, you know you're sharing, you know you're doing it because you're able and because it's part of who you are. We just do it because we can, and you don't expect ever anything in return. You don't do anything because you expect to get something back. You help because you're in the position, because you can. Also, what she told us, you have to be a lady. Always a lady wherever you are, even in your own home. Now, this does not mean that you have to dress up. It just means that you have to behave according to values. That if you go into somebody's home, you respect their way of thinking and you live according to their rules. That is what a lady does. A lady means dressing the part. Leave something up to imagination. You do not expose. Women will never have the same rights as men, maybe in the next generation, but so far we're still fighting for it. Learn to work like a horse. It's the only way you're gonna get anything done. To work like a horse. To be a lion and protect your cubs and protect your family when it's necessary, wherever it's necessary. But being a lion and lioness and protecting your family does not mean slaughtering others. It simply means protecting what is yours. To be like a wolf, always on guard. To treat others with respect, but always be wary. Just because you're a good person doesn't mean that everybody else has the same good heart as you. It still doesn't mean that you don't trust them. Like a wolf will run with other packs, but he'll always be wary. He'll always be careful. He'll always be watchful. He'll always be mindful. And a wolf never ever loses his guard. The wolverine, like a lady, behaves in the pack, knows her place, but does not mean that she submits to others. It means being yourself and being strong. And that's what it's all about after all, being strong and be able to look after yourself and look after others and to work hard for what you want. It's the only way you can achieve anything. Don't expect others to give it to you, because you'll be, the time you're sitting there and waiting to get things from others, it's the time you could have been wasting or spending on bettering yourself, on improving yourself. That's my grandma. That's my amazing gran. And to this day, I think all those laws, rules, regulations, words to live by, to me, they have as much value now in 2019 as they did in 1969, 1979, 40, 50 years later. Yeah, they still have the same words. A lot of things don't. Price of gold has gone up and down. Price of oil has been fluctuating. But those words of wisdom, they'll probably be around for another 50 years. Thanks, Gran.
Ja, Eureka, ich will dir was erzählen von meiner Großmutter, Ivelies 18. Ivelies war ihr Name und sie hieß Ivelies Pauline Schuster und wurde in Ersingen bei Pforzheim geboren im Jahr 1892 und dort ist sie auch aufgewachsen. Sie ist nie aus ihrem Dorf herausgekommen und hat dann 1913 hat sie den Goldarbeiter Emil Josef Schuster geheiratet. Aus der Ehe gingen 4 Kinder hervor. Es waren 3 Mädchen und ein Junge. Die älteste Tochter, die Hedwig, das war meine Mutter. Im Jahr 1938 kommt meine Schwester Brigitte als erstes Kind meiner Eltern, Kilian und Hedwig Reiling, zur Welt. Es war damals eine wahrhaft schwierige Zeit. Hitler hatte in Deutschland die Macht übernommen und keine Familie konnte sich den Veränderungen oder konnte den Veränderungen entgehen. Der Krieg im Osten wurde systematisch und konsequent vorbereitet. Unser Vater, Kilian, wurde für die Autobahnbrücken, damals wurde ja alles gepflastert, dienstverpflichtet und als Pflasterer eingesetzt. So war er die Woche meist über in Süddeutschland von zu Hause weg. Die Zeit vorher hatte er als Arbeitsloser für die Kirche gefront, also fast nichts verdient. Der Lohn wurde in Pfennigen abgerechnet damals. Man war froh, trotzdem waren die Leute froh, dass die 8 Millionen Arbeitslosen von der Straße weg waren. Das Autobahnprogramm hatte es vor allem ermöglicht, dass Hitler die ganze Mehrheit oder die überwiegende Mehrheit der Deutschen hinter sich bringen konnte. Unsere Mutter Hedwig hatte in Pforzheim bei Wilhelm Wolf als Bürsterin Arbeit gefunden. Wir wohnten zur Miete bei Emily und Stefan Schuster in bester Hausgemeinschaft. 1942 kam dann mitten im Zweiten Weltkrieg, kam ich dann zur Welt. Im Jahr 1945 wurde Pforzheim von den Engländern vollkommen zerstört. In dieser Zeit stand mein Bettchen bei den Großeltern im Keller. Schwester Brigitte und ich wuchsen dann bei der Großmutter Elise und beim Großvater Emil in der Bahnhofstraße 18 auf. Mein Vater Kilian war seit 40 zur Wehrmacht eingezogen, erst in der Tschechoslowakei und dann in Frankreich in der Festung Royan. Unsere Mutter Hedwig war also alleinerziehend. Obwohl wir wenig hatten damals, war für mich die Zeit, in der ich bei meinen Großeltern war, eine schöne, sehr schöne Zeit für mich. Großmutter war die Seele des Hauses und die Chefin der Großfamilie mit 8 Personen, die versorgt werden mussten. Die blinde Helene, die Schwester meines Großvaters, war auch zu betreuen. Sie konnte trotz ihrer Blindheit kleine Hausarbeiten verrichten und sie war auch einfach in der Familie integriert. Onkel Ewald, dem man 3 Finger abgeschossen hatte, kam vom Krieg zurück und lebte mit uns in der Großfamilie. Mein Großvater arbeitete damals in Pforzheim bei der Degussa. Er war Walzer, er verarbeitete Goldbarren zu Goldblech. Wir hatten eine Kleinstlandwirtschaft zu betreuen. Es war eine Kuh, eine Ziege, ein Schwein und vielleicht 8 oder 10 Hühner und ein Hund in der Familie. Diese Kleinstlandwirtschaft musste uns alle ernähren. Pro Woche wurde einmal Brot gebacken. Mehl aus eigenem Getreide ließen wir bei Müller mahlen. Es waren meist 4 Laibe Brot mit der Aufschrift Ivelies 18, Abkürzung für Bahnhofstraße 18. Die Laibe als Teig wurden in Strohbackkörbe zum Bäcker getragen und nachmittags wieder fertig gebacken abgeholt. Auf den Laiben war dann die Kennung von der Großmutter, Ivelies 18. Das war auf einem Abriss vom Zeitungsrand angebracht. In guter Erinnerung sind mir auch die Schlachtfeste, meist im Januar oder Februar. Morgens kam der Metzger ins Haus, dann wurde das Schwein aus dem Stall geholt, es wurde mit einem Schuss betäubt, danach abgestochen. Das Blut wurde gerührt und das Schwein mit heißem Wasser überbrüht und die Borsten entfernt. Sodann wurde es aufgehängt, ausgenommen und zerlegt. Es gab Kesselfleisch und die Füllung für die Würste wurden vorbereitet. Blutwurst, Leberwurst und Schwartenmagen. Es war eine große Arbeit, bis abends alles fertig war und wir für einige Monate wieder Fleisch und Wurst zur Verfügung hatten. Verwandte und Nachbarn halfen, da man allein nicht fertig geworden wäre. Diese Gegenseitigkeit der Nachbarschaftshilfe habe ich später nirgends mehr gefunden. Im Oktober wurde Kraut zu Sauerkraut verarbeitet. Dazu kam die Krautschneiderin mit einem übergroßen Hobel, um das Filterkraut zu schneiden. Das Filterkraut wurde dann in Keramikbehälter mit Salz und Essig eingelegt. Bei allen diesen Ereignissen war ich zusammen mit meiner Großmutter und konnte ihr helfen. Wir hatten auch 2 kleine Weinberge. Die ganze Pflege der Weinberge machte meine Großmutter fast allein. Ich war sehr oft mit dabei. Die Traubenlese war ebenfalls ein Höhepunkt im Jahresablauf. Auch dabei spielte die Nachbarschaftshilfe eine ganz große Rolle. Die Trauben wurden geschnitten miteinander, also die Nachbarn halfen, und dann wurden sie gemahlen, gepresst und dann ließ man den Traubensaft gären, bis im Frühjahr dann nach dem Ablassen ein guter Wein im Keller lag. 500 bis 600 Liter hatten wir immerhin. Für mich war der Wein verboten, da ich damals noch zu klein war. Die Kinder bekamen Gänsewein. Das war mit viel Wasser verdünnter Apfelmost, von dem wir auch genügend im Keller hatten. Meine Großmutter hat mir auch die ersten Schritte beim Basteln beigebracht. Ich durfte, wie das üblich war, alte rostige Nägel gerade klopfen. Dann bauten mein Freund Elmar und ich ein Häuschen mit den Nägeln hinter dem Haus, wobei uns meine Großmutter nach Kräften unterstützte. Wir konnten dann in dem Häuschen 4 Stallhasen halten. Ich ging gerne zur Schule damals. Großmutter kontrollierte meine Hausaufgaben, da meine Mutter ja ihrer Fabrikarbeit nachgehen musste. Später machte ich die Hausaufgaben allein und die Großmutter ließ mich das auch allein machen. Sie hatte Vertrauen, dass das ordentlich gemacht wurde. Zum Geburtstag durften wir Kinder uns etwas Besonderes zum Essen wünschen. Wenn mein Geburtstag im Februar kam, wünschte ich mir fast jedes Jahr Kartäuserklöße mit Vanillesoße. Das ist eine ganz schöne Erinnerung an meine Großmutter, die gut kochen konnte und die Großfamilie sehr gut zusammenhielt und auch bescheidene Mahlzeiten immer zu einer Freude auf den Tisch brachte. Auch mein Großvater hatte mich ins Herz geschlossen. Fast jeden Sonntag hatte er mit mir einen großen Spaziergang gemacht. Im Rückblick meine ich, dass beide, Großvater und Großmutter, eine gute Ehe gelebt haben und ihren Glauben ernst genommen haben. Diese familiäre Geborgenheit wirkt in mir bis heute nach, stärker als meine Erinnerungen an meine Eltern, die ich auch gern habe. Am Weihnachtsabend 1964 starb meine liebe Großmutter an einem Schlaganfall. Als wir von der Kirche heimkamen, lag sie tot in der Küche. Das war's. Das war's, die Großmutter.
You know, in Zulu they say gogo.
Yeah.
And then in Sotho we call them kuku. Yeah. Hello, my name is Sisi Modise. I'm South African. I grew up and was raised in South Africa. I want to tell you a little bit about my upbringing, specifically my grandmother who raised me up. I just want to share what I value, what I learned from her with you, and I hope you enjoyed that. It's just a different perspective. Her name was Johanna. You know, South Africa back then, you had your what we call the given name, and you also had what was known as Christian name. So her Christian name was Johanna, and her given name was Kangale. So it could be difficult to pronounce. My parents got divorced when I was very small. I was hardly a few months. I was about 4 months old when they got divorced, and my father won custody, and being a man and needing to work, he couldn't raise us up. I have a sister, so it was 2 girls. My sister is older than me, and my grandmother raised us up as her own children. I remember growing up not being able to differentiate or even thinking of who is my mother. She was everything to me. I referred to her as grandma, but you know, it sounded a bit strange because she was the only person there. My mother was gone, and we only got to know her much later in life. I met my mother for the first time when I was 14 years old. But my upbringing, I grew up in the most loving family. She loved me and my sister. She loved us dearly. As I'm saying, she raised us up as her own children. Very protective. And, you know, everything I know, everything I am, everything I'm passing on to my own children is everything she taught me. I'm absolutely privileged to have been raised by her. I don't know who I would be if I had a different upbringing, and if I were to do it all over, I would do it again. I learned great lessons. I learned to love. I learned what we call Ubuntu in its true and purest manner. You know, how to love, how to appreciate, how to care about others, not only others who like you or who you kind of click with, but literally everybody. And that also meant learning how to forgive those who maybe you don't get along with. So I grew up in a very small village where everybody looked out for one another. You know, you may or may not know, we call it village, but I grew up in Soweto. The part of Soweto I grew up in is called Meadowlands, and in that zone, it's Meadowlands, and Meadowlands it's sectioned in what we call zones, and our zone was zone 2. Literally everybody lived for another. You know, our neighbors would come over, just knock and ask for a cup of sugar. That was normal. The other neighbor will just come and knock and ask for salt. That was our upbringing, and it wasn't we didn't see anything funny or strange about it. It was just a way of living. When in the morning, when you wake up, your neighbor is doing something, you speak with them as if they were part of the family. So all I remember from my grandmother is really about caring for others, passing on what you know to others. What I remember the most, and this is something I do value, it's her love. She had unconditional love and very accommodating, very understanding. She always saw the best out of every person. When I complained about somebody, she would always say that people are acting a certain way because of the experiences and everything else that, you know, in their lives, and because of that, she found it easier to forgive the person. You know, one of the most amazing lessons I learned from her is to learn to separate the person from their deeds. So meaning that if someone does something to you, doesn't mean that you should hate that person. This became so relevant, you know, because I grew up in South Africa during apartheid time. What she taught us about the environment in which we grew up was always, you know, she would say, just remember, white people are not evil. It's their systems that we don't like. White people are very nice people. They're just like you and me, but they've put all these laws and system that separate us from them. And, you know, that goes a long way as to, you know, whether it's my neighbor or it's someone, she says, that person is not evil. You know, I should then look within that person what is really evil or what it is that I don't like. And within that, she taught me what forgiveness is. There are just so many lessons that I learned from her that make me who I am. And I'm so proud to pass all that knowledge. Some of it, my children are growing up here in Germany. It's a different time, it's a different culture and all that, but whatever I can pass on to them that I learned, that shaped my life, that shaped me to be a woman I am, to know and understand passion, you know, about other people. I'm trying to pass all that to my children with the hope that they see value in it, and it adds on to their development as they face this world we live in. I'm very, very privileged to have been part of that family, which was basically my grandmother, my sister, my father, and our 2 uncles. That was the entire family. More than that, we had the community around us, which was so supportive. They lived the true sense of Ubuntu. Tell you a little bit more about Ubuntu. Ubuntu means, in its true sense, in Zulu, we say, umuntu ngumuntu ngomunye umuntu. And then in Sotho, which is my clan, or my tribe, we say, mutu ki mutu ka mutu. That means, I am who I am because of those around me. I am who I am because of other people. That is, for me, the essence of my life. I am who I am because of everyone. You know, the people I meet socially, professionally, and, you know, everywhere else. They have all contributed at, you know, varying degrees to my life, to my well-being, to my even my desires. So Ubuntu for me, it's you know, I grew up with it, and I'm still to this day. It's a very, very fundamental element of my life and who I am. Thank you.
Wenn ich von meiner Oma Trude spreche, dann kommt mir in Erinnerung, wie viel Liebe und Wärme sie ausstrahlte und dass das wie so ein Magnet war, auf den wir Kinder, von dem wir Kinder einfach angezogen waren. Allein bei ihr zu sitzen, in ihrer Nähe zu sein, hatte man das Gefühl, dass man mit Liebe aufgetankt wird und immer voller wird mit einer unbändigen Güte und Wärme und Geborgenheit, die sich einfach so gut anfühlte. Und man merkte gar nicht, wie die, oder eigentlich dachte man, die Zeit steht still, weil das wie eine große Eingebundenheit in so einer Liebesblase war. Ja. Als ich 6 Jahre alt war, habe ich das erste Mal meine Oma Trude kennengelernt, weil ich in Südafrika lebte und dort aufgewachsen bin und Oma Trude in Deutschland lebte. Und 1979 kam sie zu Besuch und das war ein ganz besonderer Anlass, weil, soweit ich weiß, war es sogar die Konfirmation meiner ältesten Schwester und war natürlich ein großes Fest. Mein Opa väterlicherseits, Opa Karl, kam mit und meine Tante Martha. Jedenfalls war das natürlich für die ein großes Erlebnis, so eine weite Reise anzutreten. Und für uns Kinder war das wie Geburtstag, Weihnachten, Ostern und Neujahr alles zusammen. Und insbesondere war die Zusammenkunft oder das Kennenlernen und die Zusammenkunft mit der Oma was außergewöhnlich Schönes. Und sie kam uns noch weitere 2 Mal in Südafrika besuchen. Und als Kind einmal 9-Jähriger, 8- bis 9-Jähriger und dann nochmal als 10- bis 11-Jähriger bin ich dann in Deutschland gewesen, habe sie da auch nochmal gesehen und besucht. Und jedenfalls, was ich sagen wollte, in Südafrika kann ich mich jetzt nicht an irgendwelche Unterhaltungen groß über den Inhalt mit ihr erinnern. Aber ich weiß einfach, dieses Gefühl spüre ich heute noch, um sie herum zu sein und diese Herzensgüte von ihr zu erfahren. Und als ich dann im Erwachsenenalter mitgeteilt und erfahren habe, dass sie durch sehr viel Schmerz und Leid in ihrem Leben gegangen ist. Sie ist in beiden Weltkriegen geflüchtet. Im Zweiten Weltkrieg aus Pommern, das war dieser ganz kalte Winter 1944 oder was 45. Jedenfalls war sie da auf der Flucht mit meiner Mutti und meiner Tante Inge. Die haben Hunger erlitten. Meine Oma wurde vergewaltigt von russischen Soldaten. Und ihr einziges Ziel war, ihre beiden Kinder da durchzubringen, Sicherheit irgendwie und sich dafür einzusetzen, dass ihre Kinder überleben, ihre beiden Töchter. Und trotz dieses Riesenschmerzes, den sie erlebt hat, hat sie es nie sich anmerken lassen. Zumindest kann ich das als zweitjüngster Enkel nicht bestätigen. Insgesamt hatte sie 9 Enkelkinder beziehungsweise 10. Einer Bruder ist, vor dem ich überhaupt geboren war, leider tödlich verunglückt, aber die Tatsache ist, dass ihre Nachkommenschaft eine große Reichweite hatte und das, was sie wollte, war, das Leben weiterzugeben, und das zeigt auch, wie groß ihre Nachkommenschaft war. Und wenn man eins bestätigen kann, dann war es für sie die Heiligkeit der Familie, die Bedeutung und Wichtigkeit der Familie, weil sie kam aus einer sehr großen Familie, hatte auch 4 Geschwister oder sogar 5, wovon 2 Brüder im Krieg ihr Leben lassen mussten. Und in dem zunächst Westpreußen und auch dann später Pommern, wo sie als Familie gelebt haben, war es sehr wichtig, dass die Familie zusammenhält, weil sonst hätten sie nicht gemeinsam überleben können. Es war ganz bedeutend, dass wenn man eine Landwirtschaft hat und, so wie ich erfahren habe, eine Ziegelei und ein Gasthof oder Gutshaus, mussten alle mithelfen, damit man genügend Essen hat, genügend von allem, um auch durch zum Beispiel einen harten Winter zu kommen. Und das ist trotz dem verheerenden Krieg, wo die ganze Familie fast aufgelöst wurde, verstorben ist, getötet wurde, hat sie das mitgenommen und dann ihre Töchter weitergegeben. Und über ihre Töchter, also auch meine Mutti, wurde es dann diese Herzensangelegenheit auch weitergegeben. Und was sie durch ihr Tun und durch ihre Güte weitergegeben hat, das hat mein Opa dann, also der Opa Max, ihr Ehemann, sehr gut immer in Worte fassen können, in einer sehr bildhaften Sprache. Und er hat meiner Mutti erzählt, die wichtigste Bildung ist die Herzens-Bildung. Und vor allem meine Großeltern und meine Mutti konnten das sehr gut, nachdem sie geflüchtet sind, auch nachempfinden und wussten, wovon sie sprechen, weil sie wurden verachtet und geächtet, weil sie Flüchtlinge waren. Flüchtlinge aus dem Osten, weil sie scheinbar den anderen was wegnehmen wollten. Und dabei war das gar nicht so. Sie wollten nur ein sicheres Zuhause für sich selbst haben, wo sie alle gemeinsam sein können und den Schmerz und das Verbrechen, was sie alles erleben mussten, in Liebe trösten können. Und es zeigt einfach, wie wichtig es ist, dass die Menschen verstehen, es geht um Liebe und Gemeinsamkeit und den Zusammenhalt innerhalb der Familie. Und wenn man das erfährt, und davon kann ich mit Fug und Recht behaupten, das hat meine Mutti durch ihre Eltern erleben dürfen, dann wird diese Güte und Verständnis weitergegeben. Liebe wird weitergegeben. Die Herzensbildung wird weitergegeben. Es ist egal, wie viel akademische Bildung man hat. Wenn man das nicht von seinem Zuhause mitbekommt und mitgegeben wird, dann leben wir in einer Welt, die wenig Verständnis, Achtsamkeit, Mitgefühl für den Nächsten, ob Mensch, ob Tier, ob Pflanze, ermöglicht. Und das ist eine Rolle, die die Großmutter so erfüllt, wenn sie diese Grundlagen auch selber von ihrem Elternhaus mitbekommen hat. Und insofern ist es ein Appell an die Menschheit, die Wichtigkeit ihrer Wurzeln, ihrer Großeltern und ihrer Eltern zu ehren und die Möglichkeit zu schaffen, dass Kinder in einem geborgenen, sorgsamen und liebevollen Zuhause aufwachsen. Ja, das war ein Teil meiner Wurzeln, die ich in Ehren halte und auch noch mehr darüber erfahren möchte. Ja.
The last while, all her piggies were gone, but she lived with Eureka and I. She made it very interesting. Let's put it that way. But it was still our granny and we still loved her. At night she would come back to us for a couple of seconds and it was wonderful. I still couldn't believe that she would slip away like that again. And then the day came that we had to put her to rest, and now we're at Doves in Wilmot at the funeral home. When Opa used to say they walked around like storks, and everything was formal and gloomy, and it wasn't a nice place to be, but we had to go and do this thing. So I'm sitting across from this stork at the funeral home, and he then asked for her ID. And I produced her ID, and he took the ID, opened it, closed it again and threw it across the table. He said, "This birth date has been scratched out." This was, of course, that nobody should ever know her age. And if you wanted to be her friend, you didn't ask about her age. Yeah, that was a sad time. That was a sad time. We always remember her as being the caring matriarch. We lived on a farm, and she would have the ox slaughtered. Obviously the head and the entrails would be taken out, and when she donned her white coat, that was the day my father took me to the zoo. Not because he was afraid I would see it. He couldn't handle it. He loved to eat it, but he didn't want to know about things dying. So we had a little back room on the stoop, and there would my grandmother would come in a white coat, all dressed up, and then she would start to proceed to cut this thing up into pieces that we could all eat. I mean, if you think about it today, what a woman. She also had another side to her, that she was a businesswoman. Imagine this, in the 1940s, she had her own sloping company. This was quite something for women in those days. She was never a woman's liber. She was just something on her own, like the rest of our family. Women's liber is not for me, but we just did our own thing. And Oma Sarah would be driven by her chauffeur. Thank God, this poor Buick lasted a long time, because she wasn't driving the damn thing all the time. She would visit my brother in hospital every day. She was totally dedicated to us. My brother always made a joke of it to say that she was his slave, because every time she visited him in hospital, for the 2 years that he was in hospital, strapped to his back with his little leg in the air, she would bring him a new car every day. So she was dedicated to us. It was phenomenal. It really was. I think she also loved my brother intensely, because she lost her own son. She never got over that. I realized how important today, I realize how important mourning is, because I found her as a little girl with a room all in total darkness, and she'd found a shoe, and she was holding on to the shoe and crying. That was bad. To today, I hate a dark room. Give me light. Where I grew up, it was a small village, but everybody knew everybody else. Of course, the Skinnering was something else, but never mind. Your neighbor knew more about you than what you knew about yourself. As a little girl, when they used to come and scrape the road with a big grader, my grandmother would send me out with a big flask of hot coffee and lots of either freshly homemade bread, home-baked bread, or cookies or rusks, whatever she had. All the people in the road had to have something to eat first. And I've kept that tradition, because when someone comes to your home or someone's working for you, it's only right. They also get hungry. I think it's a form of grace, really, that you share what you have. Whatever you have, you share it. Old Johannesburg Pretoria Road today doesn't really exist anymore, which is sad. I like to drive in the old roads. Brings back memories of driving home, my grandmother in the middle, my father and mother in the front. If somebody would turn in front of my father, my mother would go ballistic, okay? Hands, hands, hands. My mother could pull faces like nobody could. So, of course, my father would get so embarrassed about this. And he'd fight with her about, no, don't do that. That's not nice. Don't do that. She'd wait till my father turn her and go, ah! Of course, I sat behind her, and this was hilarious. I've never seen faces like my whole life. But anyway, that was my mother. And my grandmother would sit in the back seat. My brother and I in either arm. She was very affectionate towards us. We also slept in my granny's arm until I was about, until she left. There was warmth, there was love, there was no doubt that we were very, very loved and we were cherished. And I think that makes a lot, that means a lot in a person's life. Later on, you have the confidence and the self-assurance that you can carry on over to your children. My gran and my mother would, after dinner, after the dishes were washed, no such thing as dishwashers in those days, of course, but we would all wash dishes together. And then we'd go to my mom's bedroom, and we would all sit on the bed or lie in the bed, and we would talk. They never ever, it was seldom that they fought. And of course my grandmother loved my father. She loved my dad. There was no such thing as horrible skoonma. They were crazy about each other. It was like this understanding of each other, that he would take care of my mom and they had their own understanding of each other. If my mom and my gran would have a difference, I would of course cling to my grandmother, and my mother would get very cross about this. You see, you're stealing my children. You see, she wants to go with you. I got into a lot of trouble because of that, but she brought me up. My mom had to work. There was no question about that, because, yeah, even those days, women had to start working. But my gran was there. She was always there. I think it's so important for children to come home and find the motherly figure there. That was wonderful. I think that was what made it such a happy childhood. And I think children who are allowed to come home and find their mommy or their granny at home, it's a very, very big privilege. It's to have mommies and to have grannies. They form part of your life. They form part of your soul, that you remember them forever.
My maternal grandmother was quite an amazing individual. She had to leave school at the age of 14 and worked herself into success, that she had bought her own house, but an amazing individual. With God in your heart and money in your pocket, no one can harm you. And if someone was mean or ugly, she would say, keep style. Just because they're like that doesn't mean you have to be like that. Stay true to yourself and keep style. She was a very strong individual. Her grandmother and mother had been in the English concentration camps in South Africa and had managed to survive those atrocities. So she had quite a lot of power. I'm very, very grateful to have had the privilege of having her as my grandmother. I remember the most amazing energy coming from her. I loved cats or little creatures, and I would try and catch all the wildest creatures I could find growing up on a farm. And they would just invariably end up on her lap and remain there. She could attract anything because she just had this phenomenal spirit of, she was a sanctuary in herself. And all these amazing little creatures that were scared, frightened, very wild, they'd end up sitting on her lap and falling asleep, just in utter peace. She just had this incredible energy about her, this aura. She could be vicious if you pushed the wrong button, but never violent. And I remember being disrespectful to her, and her turning around, looking me dead in the eye and saying, "I didn't speak to you like that. Why are you speaking to me like that?" And I have to say, shame was used in a beautiful way. It wasn't to cripple my wings or my development or evolvement. It was just, you're better than that. Keep style. And I'm still learning every day as I approach 50 years of age. I go back and I reflect on that, and I'm still grateful for what I was taught. My father had left Germany and resettled in South Africa. My father's mother, unfortunately, I never met in person. But I do remember my father speaking of his mother and how she struggled after the Second World War. They'd lost everything. His father had been one of the first electricians to bring electricity to Buttersford, had a factory, and then his beloved son and heir, who was thought to take over the business, died in the war. And I think the trauma and the loss destroyed a lot of him, and he died of cancer. So my father didn't have much memory of his father, but of his mother there was utter devotion or respect. Unfortunately, with him moving so far away, he didn't see a lot of his mother's last years. But there's one memory that he left me with, was that they'd had so little to eat, and there was like a half a potato ration for him, and it just didn't seem enough for a growing boy. And he remembered his mother giving him his ration. So she had gone without food for a few days, but the babies were everything. And it's really sad they couldn't have more of each other. The other grandmother I had, I've come to believe God takes and God gives. And if you're awake, you'll realize, or you're conscious, you'll realize what gifts are actually bestowed in your path. Only if you want to. If you want to remain a victim, you won't see what riches you are blessed with. And both of these women that I was blessed to have, or all three of them, you can only appreciate them if you don't have the victim mindset approach. All three women went through tremendous challenges in the last century. They just came up standing strong. Sometimes they were semi-broken, but they still stood up straight and they kept their dignity, and I love that. It's a tremendous pearl of the soul to pass on. My adoptive grandmother was also German. She'd come from Hamburg, survived the war, survived Russian gang rape when she was interned, But you'd never know. I only learned it from my mother later. But she was quite the feminist, and she'd get upset with some or other undignified male individual. She would usually use the term, "I'd like to kick him in the pants." It was strength. It was self-respect and not tolerating abuse. She had 3 sons, sad problems amongst them. The youngest son's children moved back to Holland because his wife was from Holland, so they moved back there, and she lost all touch with her 2 grandchildren from that child. But she never ceased to speak of them. Throughout all the years I knew her, she always spoke of Dita and Karen, who she loved so much and who she missed so much. And it was very sad she wasn't able to give them any of her strength or her life's wisdom. But as I wasn't able to know my father's mother, and she wasn't able to have her grandchildren, we found each other. And when my grandmother wasn't there anymore, she was still there for me. She was one of the first people to inspire me to draw. I had many amazing souls that I was blessed with who made me curious enough to go into art. But drawing pretty pictures or inspirational images or strong images isn't enough for me. I found that I would be an extremely empty individual would I not be able to value these incredible souls who graced my path of life. So I'm very, very grateful to have had these strong women who always wanted to do amazing different things, conquering life in their curiosity and their challenges. You have to be able to know who you are, and I think knowing your stock, where you come from, or your gene pool, where you come from, is very important to know what you're capable of and what lies in your potential as an individual. So I'm very grateful. I spent so much time with my grandparents and my adoptive grandmother. The spirit there is definitely so rich. I'm very, very grateful to have had them. But it's the end of the day that one realizes that the grandmothers, those that are greater role models, and there are many that aren't perfect, that didn't quite understand the curve of the priority of life. The priority of the life that you live is that your child lives on, your descendants live on in reaching the highest potential they can within themselves, what they were born to do. And if you understand that the priority of life is living it to the fullest, to your highest potential, then you're on the right track. Whether you manage it is a different story. Whether you grasp a lesson is a different story. But I think God always gives you a second chance. God, Source, whatever you want to call it, Buddha, Allah. The great mystery is my favorite naming of this amazing being. I believe it gives you a second chance, and I think being a grandmother, you've made all the mistakes, you've lived your wild life, and finally you get to see that patience, love and dedication is what a child truly needs, and that you invest all of that sacredness in a little person. That's the meaning of having that privilege, seeing how sacred life is, and that child, by having that culture of love and understanding, that it has that basic internal culture, you know it's on the right track. Do you know how utterly, utterly, utterly sacred life truly is? By giving a child love and patience and dedication, understanding, you honor all life and your own life. Might not be your own blood, but I do believe that your soul and your culture lives on in that child and how it will treat other human beings. Spiritual sustainability is this beautiful concept given to me by collective consciousness. I think people should question the amazingness that is in them. And if we don't train our minds and our souls and our hearts to look for that sacredness, we're missing out on a lot of life. As Einstein said, there are two ways of living your life. One, as if everything is amazing and a miracle, and the other as if nothing is. But then you're not living, you're not alive. The first version I prefer. So did Einstein. And we stand naked before you, without pretense, without defense, without armor, allowing ourselves to simply be. And in this moment we wonder, why do we ever think that there need be more?